Hello my friends, Midnight Geek here. Tonight I've got a fully loaded retro PC right next to me, a gift from another retro tech enthusiast and friend of the channel. Don't worry, the case is modern, but inside is the real deal. The conversation that led to this was short and effective. Hey, I built a retro PC, but it doesn't work and I don't have time to fix it. And so, since my slogan is basically if you don't like it, I don't mind it, the PC ended up right on my desk.
Alright geek, enough talking, let's see what's inside.
Be quiet please. The first thing that catches my eyes is this purple PCB, so this has to be an ECS. The power supply is a Be Quiet, which means it's quite new. And wait a second, is that a rounded cable for the floppy drive? What? That's pretty cool. The motherboard is an ECS K7S5A Pro revision 5 and it came out around 2001. You might also find it under the name PC Chips M830LU. It has the SIS735 chipset and uses socket A, so it supports Duron, Athlon and Athlon XP CPUs and Semprons. The video card is a GeForce FX and the sound card the Creative Odyssey. The RAM is a DDR module from Gaia with heatsinks. The system also includes a floppy drive, an optical drive and a Be Quiet 350 watts power supply. This power supply has 150 watts on the 5V rail, which is important for socket A systems. Okay, it's time to dive deeper and figure out what's wrong with this computer. Before that though, I got a few extra goodies from the same guy. First up, a Pentium 4 1.6A socket 478. This means it's the lowest clocked Northwood core CPU. Interesting, I can now compare a 1.6 GHz Northwood versus 1.6 GHz Willamette. This is going to be the battle of the century. This is going to be Star Wars versus Star Trek. Next, there are two RAM sticks, 1 GB and 512 MB of DDR. There's also another 512 MB DDR module from Gaia with heatsinks, just like the one already in the system. Then I see a small, carefully wrapped package. Something about it tells me I should treat it with respect. The way it's packed leaves no room for doubt. This is something important. It's surrounded by foam. It got pins. And it's socket A. Could be a Duron, could be an Athlon. No, it's a Geode, a Geode, an AMD Geode. So what is AMD Geode? In short, it's a low power Athlon XP, used in embedded systems and similar. The best part, it just happens to fit right into the socket A motherboard. Amazing. But enough about that. Back to the computer. And well, it does not start. Like at all. Planet Mars has more signs of life than this. First step, BIOS reset. No luck. My first guess is the power supply. Who knows, maybe there's some Athlon XP 4000 plus in there sucking up more juice than the power supply can handle. I have a power supply with 220 watts, so if the system doesn't boot with mine, then the power supply isn't the problem. I plug in my power supply, the fan spins 4 times, then everything dies again. At least we're getting somewhere. From the way this looks, there might be a short circuit somewhere. It's time for the ultimate diagnostic method. Pull everything out, spread the parts on the table and test them one by one. I won't bore you with the disassembly process because all you'll hear is this and this and this. And now here it is, a beautiful GeForce FX 5700 LE. My dream is to collect every single FX series video cards, so I'm one step closer. This is a very nice card. It's clean, simple, it has no dust, it has a delicious blue PCB and a cooler that looks just right for a card like this. I'm curious how loud it is. Usually the smaller the fan, the louder it gets. Just like people, the less they know, the louder they shout. Or as someone once said, a weak argument yells the loudest. Next up, the Creative Odyssey 1, model SB0090. From what I know, the fact that it doesn't have gold-plated connectors means that this is an OEM sound card. Basically, it was made to be sold inside pre-built systems from Dell, Hewlett-Packard, Packard-Dell, and so on. Removing this big motherboard from this small case is a real challenge, especially with the backplate still attached. Speaking of which, he also gave me the original motherboard box, and inside I found the manual. The original driver CD, remember PC Chilin? Apparently it was considered valuable software bundled back in the day. Also I found a floppy cable, so this motherboard is now officially feature complete. First I'm going to test it without a video card or RAM, I just want to see if the CPU fan spins. And what do you know, it turns on and stays on. And that's a good sign of things to come. Next I reinstalled the FX 5700 and the RAM that was already in there. And guess what? It doesn't start. Oh no! But after switching the power supply off and on again, it finally boots and sends video signal to the monitor. But what do we have here? The system thinks we have a Duron running at 2400 MHz. Yeah, sure. Moving on, I've tried the Be Quiet power supply. It works, and this time the BIOS detects an Atron running at 2400 MHz actual clock speed. Press X for doubt. So, what's special about this motherboard? First, it has a universal AGP slot, meaning I can install both older AGP 3.3 volts cards like a Riva 128 and newer 1.5 volts AGP cards, basically everything from the late 90s to early 2000s. That's a great feature. Next, all the capacitors have been replaced, and according to what I was told, they used high quality capacitors. Finally, this board supports both DDR and SDR memory. It's actually an awesome feature. It makes this board perfect for testing old hardware, or if you want to build a system with specific CPUs that run better with SDRAM. The final key feature of this motherboard is its support for AMD Geode. Very few motherboards actually support this processor properly. Sure, you can physically insert it into pretty much any socket A boards, but only some will actually boot. And of those, only a handful will deliver the correct low voltage, just a bit over 1 volt. Alright, what's next? I think I'll install Windows XP to see what this machine is capable of. I'll use the Be Quiet power supply, put everything back together, reinstall the sound card, add the extra 512 MB of RAM stick to make it 1 GB in total, hook up the optical drive, and install one of my own hard drives, since the system didn't come with one. By the way, don't use your hard drives and optical drives like this. First, they'll vibrate against each other, which might not be great for the hard drive. Second, it's literally sitting upside down, which might not be the best idea either. It might get headaches. And now everything's set up. I go through the usual BIOS settings and we're good to go. The CPU temperature is at 31 degrees Celsius, which is perfect. After some more testing, I confirm that this is actually an Atron XP 2400 Plus, running at a real clock speed of 2000 MHz. So I started installing Windows XP and then error. Alright, time for more troubleshooting. Yay! I swapped the RAM with a different module that I know works fine. Same issue. I even tried an SDR module because, as the old saying goes, Pentium 4 DDR, Atron XP SDR. Next, I try another optical drive, one that I know for a fact works perfectly. This time it actually gets past that step, but then disaster strikes again. BSOD, blue screen of despair. I can't take it anymore. I swap out the power supply, replace the video card with a Riva TNT2 and even remove the sound card. Now the system detects an Atron XP 1800 Plus. Great, progress. But no matter what I try, blue screen. At this point I'm thinking the motherboard just doesn't like the Atron XP 2400 Plus. So I'm switching the strategy, more precisely the CPU. I install my trusty Duron and finally it detects it correctly. Duron 1200 MHz, perfect. And with great joy in my heart, my friends, I can finally announce that Windows XP has been installed. Finally. In the end, it was definitely a good call that he passed this PC to me. I don't think he would have wanted to go through all this trouble. That's what we're here for, the nerds who mess with old hardware. We're the ones spending hours tinkering with ancient hardware, trying to figure out why it won't work. And honestly, if something works perfectly from the get-go, we don't even like it. It takes all the fun away. The real magic of retro tech is in the challenge, using intelligence, patience and knowledge to get something working that wasn't easy to fix. That's exactly why many modern games feel soulless. You just go through the motions and what comes out the other side is the final product. That's it. Boring. Back to the PC. It worked with the Duron, but I don't want to leave it in there permanently. The Atron XP 2400 Plus acts weird, so it's time to bring in the AMD Geode. First, since it uses so little power, you can run it with a modern power supply, even if it doesn't provide many amps on the 5V rail. Second, because it runs so cool, you barely need any cooling at all. And you know what this means? A 100% silent Windows 98 PC is possible, again, but not today, sorry. The BIOS reports around 1.2 volts, which is perfect for a Geode like this. CPU temperature is around 26 degrees Celsius. I really want to see what happens if I run it completely passive. That's next on the list. Booted into Windows XP, I've installed all the drivers, programs and games without problems. The system is rock solid in 3D Mark 2001 AC, pulling a score of 5300 points. And after the benchmark, the CPU reached 40 degrees Celsius. That's with passive cooling. I turned off the fan completely and the room temperature is around 24.5 degrees. What do you think? Pretty cool, right? By the way, the entire system under load pulls 57 watts from the wall. That's the total power draw from the power supply. So, if we apply some basic physics, thank you Kirchhoff, and take an 80% efficiency rate because power supplies at lower consumption have low efficiency, this means that actual system power consumption is around 46 watts. That's crazy. Now for the best part, gaming. First up, Half-Life at 1024x768. Here's the fun part, it's running in software mode, meaning the CPU is doing all the rendering. And yet an Atom at 750 MHz can still push around 20 FPS at this resolution. Honestly, that's really impressive for me. Imagine what I could do with this CPU. Passive cooling, no video card, small form factor. I could throw it in a tiny case and make an ultra portable retro gaming PC. Yes sir, please. Now, when I switch rendering over to the video card, the frame rate jumps from 20 to 72 FPS. Also, it seems like it's engine limited and I don't think I can push it any higher. Next up is Red Faction. This was one of the first shooters I ever played on my first PC, back in 2002. I played this game a lot. Everything is maxed out and performance jumps between 40 and 100 FPS. Technically, this is not a demanding game. It came out in 2001 and visually it's nothing mind-blowing. But let's be honest, 60 FPS in 2001 was an absolute dream. I have no idea what I even tested Sega Rally Championship. This game is from 1997. And honestly, how did a game from 97, which was actually released on another platform back in 95, look this good? Well, enjoy the ride and my absolute skills as a driver. Heroes 4 is a 2D game, but for me it's one of those must-try titles for all PCs. Heroes 4 and Quake 3 are part of my rite of passage when testing retro systems, and there are good reasons behind both choices. Heroes 4 is here to hit me with emotions and nostalgia, just listen to this music. Quake 3 is there to pump adrenaline through my veins and get me ready for action. A more demanding game is Line of Sight Vietnam, released in 2003. Here's how it runs. I'm playing at 800x600 medium settings, and yeah, it's not super playable. Also, the game is brutally realistic. You can literally die from a stray bullet to the head. After all this gaming, the CPU temperature hit 51 degrees Celsius, and this is perfectly fine, since the maximum operating temperature is somewhere around 90 degrees Celsius. So, bottom line is that everything works. The original power on issue was probably due to a short circuit somewhere, and then there was the Athlon XP 2400 Plus incompatibility issue. But now, what's next? The guy who gave me this PC said I could keep it, but I asked him what he plays retro games on, and he told me he has a laptop from the 2000s. So, here's what I've decided. I'm going to do something I've wanted to do for a while, but never got the chance. I'm taking everything left from this computer, the case, the power supply, the sound card and the optical drive, adding some of my own parts and building him a decent Windows XP gaming system. And to stay true to my words, I'll use the hardware I recommended in my video Best Components for Windows XP. The motherboard will be a Gigabyte EP35DS3P, a socket 775 board. I'm pairing it with a Core 2 Duo E6600. For the RAM, 2GB of DDR2 800 MHz from Guile with heatsinks that look absolutely gorgeous. I couldn't just give him some random junk sticks, he gave me these. For the video card, I'm using a GeForce 9500 GT from Gainward, which has 100% passive cooling. Performance wise, it's basically an 8600 GT, so it should be decent. I'm using his ODG sound card, a Cooler Master heatsink that cools well and is pretty quiet, an 80GB SATA hard drive from Western Digital, the optical drive and the power supply. Before assembly, installation and testing, I had to replace the thermal paste for everything. First up, the motherboard, because if that old thermal paste on the NOR bridge dries up and you throw in an overclocking, you might just release the magic smoke. Of course, the heatsinks didn't come off easily, but with patience you can remove even the most stubborn heatsinks. The south bridge doesn't need new paste since it has a thermal pad, and it's the same for the heatsink near the VRMs, but the NOR bridge has thermal paste and it's rock solid, just like these solid capacitors from the motherboard. Good job, Gigabyte. It took a mix of perseverance and brute force, but I finally got rid of that ancient thermal paste. I repeated the same process for the NOR bridge heatsink and I was ready to apply fresh paste. The final result? Pure art, just look at this. The video card was easier to deal with, but not without its own issues. One screw didn't want to come out. Thankfully, someone in the comments recommended I get better tools, and I did. Thank you. And here's the PCB. It looks basic, but as long as it works, who cares? The thermal paste was also completely dried up. And since this card has passive cooling, leaving it like that would have killed it in 4 days of gaming. And here's the GPU die, in all its glory. This card is a bit flimsy though, the PCB bends when I tighten the screws, so I'll have to be careful not to snap it in half. Last up, the CPU gets fresh paste too. And now we're ready to go. The LGA 775 mounting system is terrible, by the way, thank you Intel. And the PC booted on the first try. How about that? 775 inside for the win. One thing I forgot to mention, the optical drive that came with the PC has a weird issue. It recognizes DVDs but won't read CDs. So I thought to myself, no problem, I'll just use one of my spares. The problem? I don't have that many that work. The first drive I tried became one with the universe. The tray wouldn't open, so I opened it myself. You don't want to know how. The second one is completely dead. And I think it's time to throw some of this junk out. I'm hoarding electronic waste at this point. In the end, I just went back to the original optical drive and only used DVDs. And what do you know, I've installed Windows XP and all the necessary software without a single issue. And here are the tests. It's playing sound through the ODG sound card, and if the sound card works, everything works. Front USBs, check. Optical drive, it works if you use DVDs. Floppy drive, works like a charm. Mission complete. Remember the issue with the Gigabyte motherboard that I've mentioned? It has this pesky little hiccup where the BIOS loves to reset every time I unplug the computer. Initially I tried swapping in different batteries but with no avail, so I decided to dive into a BIOS update. First attempt, epic fail, thanks to a mix up with the wrong BIOS from the P35. And I have the EP35, yeah. After finally updating to the latest F6 version, I was back at square one with the BIOS reset fiasco. Because it still resets. Then a retro enthusiast dropped a gem of advice. Slip a tiny piece of paper under the battery cover. I did that, popped in a shiny new Philips battery, and guess what? A victory. The BIOS stopped resetting. Let's talk about the aesthetics of this build. I installed a sleek blue fan to suck away the hot air, lending a helping hand to the video card's passive cooling. The little case surprisingly housed everything quite comfortably. I'm not usually one for doing cable management, but since this setup is going to someone else, I gave it my best shot. It's a sight to behold. The red PCB of the video card, paired with its striking red to purple radiator, alongside the motherboard's gold and orange accents, all set against the cool blue backdrop. It just works. The games? Okay, I loaded a bunch of them, including some nostalgic gems with DOSBox. Warlords takes you back to the glorious MS-DOS days, while classics like Return to Castle Wolfenstein show you a better patch. A better patch? A better path. No performance hiccups here, of course. Flatout 2 runs flawlessly at 1280 by 1024. Also, it's such an amazing game where you can do crazy stunts. For Far Cry, I've used the same resolution with all settings cranked up to ultra, and it's smooth sailing at a minimum of 60 FPS. No freezes, no stutters, or any of that nonsense, just pure gaming bliss. This rig is perfect for Windows XP gaming when covering the 2000-2005 period. I even pushed it with fear, maximum details minus soft shadows, and it performed admirably. Didn't see that coming. Now temperatures, because that video card has passive cooling. it needs to stay okay. I ran the Far Cry demo for about an hour and saw temperatures hit 57 degrees Celsius for the video card and 41 degrees Celsius for the CPU. Impressive, I would say. I really hope you've enjoyed the video. Throw in a like and a subscribe if you're feeling generous, and huge thanks to all the channel members. I really appreciate it. And until next time, have fun and be nostalgic.